Have you ever wondered if you're just being nice or you've crossed into codependency? That's what we're going to talk about today is, are you codependent or just being nice? And we're going to talk about 7 signs to know for sure. But if you're new, my name's Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. So what is codependency? It's basically a relationship pattern where you look outside of yourself for the love and approval that you can't give yourself. And what that does is that creates an unhealthy dependency on other people that ends up creating one-sided relationships. If you can relate to that, say me too in the comments. This video is going to help. So first we're going to talk about what being nice looks like as the healthy behavior, and then we're going to talk about what codependent behavior looks like, so you know the difference. So the first sign of being nice is you give without expectation. You give because you want to give and it feels good to you. The second sign is that you can say no without feeling any guilt because you know that it's okay to take care of yourself and prioritize your own needs above others, because sometimes that's part of life. We have to choose ourselves before we choose other people. The other thing is your relationships are not based on always being available. So saying no also means that you trust that your relationships are not dependent on you sacrificing yourself for others. Another sign of being nice is that you can prioritize what you need while still being able to give to others. There's a healthy balance, but there are some times when you need to choose yourself over what's being asked of you. And that's simply part of self-care, that sometimes we need to choose ourselves first, and that's okay. The next sign of being nice in a healthy way is you enjoy giving, but you don't lose yourself in that process. You don't feel compelled to help or rescue other people. So another sign of being nice is that you really enjoy helping or contributing in any situation, because it makes you feel good about yourself. There's not an expectation on the back end. So for instance, in my recovery, I have learned not to give people money anymore. But once in a while, I'll decide, you know what, I want to help somebody out financially. And I make that decision because it makes me feel good, not because I'm hoping for them to notice or do something in return. Another sign of being nice is that your self-worth doesn't depend on what you do for others. You feel good about yourself because you can accept all parts of you, not just the nice parts. So, what does codependency look like? The first sign is that you expect others to give exactly what you do, but here's the kicker: you don't ask for it. You don't say anything. This is a silent expectation that ends up making us feel really hurt and resentful because we expect people in our codependency to know what we want and need. Another sign of codependency is that saying no feels scary or selfish, so you never end up setting any boundaries. When this happens, there's usually a lot of negative assumptions going on in your head, like if I say no, the other person's going to be mad at me, or I'm going to be perceived in a negative light. For me, I had a lot of negative assumptions around what people would think of me if I said no. But the truth is when I actually started saying no, I got to learn who really loved me and who just wanted to use me. And that was a huge turning point in my recovery. Another sign of codependency is that you put other people's needs above your own, even when it hurts you. Even if you don't have any time to help that other person because maybe you have kids or you have a big work project due, you say yes anyway and you end up paying the price because you can't say no. And your value is tied up in what you do for others. Because in codependency, we get our value from becoming a super giver. And to be fair, most people who have codependent tendencies have huge hearts and you want to help and you want to contribute, but we don't know how to do that with balance. What makes this hard to give up is that usually we get a lot of praise and kudos for being a super giver. Maybe we are volunteering at our church and we're a star, or we do a lot of extra work and we get noticed for that. This is why some of our codependent tendencies are really hard to let go of. If you can relate to that, say me too in the comments. Another sign of codependency is that you can't give yourself any downtime. You're buzzing around, doing things all day, but having me time feels selfish or feels lazy. So you don't give yourself any time to unwind. You're constantly looking for things to do. And most of the time that's connected to we have a really hard time feeling our own feelings. Because when we're codependent, we usually struggle with issues of low self-esteem and insecurity. And those are usually right below the surface. And becoming compulsively busy is one way we avoid our feelings. Another sign of codependency is acts of kindness are immediately followed by resentment. You do something really nice for someone and immediately you feel like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. And you regret saying yes. I had this so many times in my recovery where I would say yes and I would want to help somebody. And then very soon after I realized, oh, I really didn't, because now I'm super resentful. And I couldn't blame the other person after a while in my recovery because I knew I was the one that said yes. And that was one of the things that we have to change in our recovery, is noticing when we really want to say no and let that be okay. Another way I did this was Christmas. I go all out with buying Christmas gifts for my family, but I still have a hard time letting go of their reaction. If they're not super happy, I get disappointed. And I know that that's just part of my codependency. So these days I don't beat myself up over it. But I know that when I give gifts, I get super excited because I'm a gift giver. And I want that other person to show me how happy I made them. And that's just not realistic in my recovery anymore. So I realized that their reaction to whatever I give is more about them and less about me. And it's definitely not about our self-worth. So another sign of codependency is the act of giving makes you feel so elated, it's almost like a high. The problem is that high gets really up there and then it's followed by an emotional crash. I've done this so many times where I'm super excited to give or help with someone, but then a couple days later I crash and I don't understand what happened. Well, what happened is I put all of my emotional eggs in that act of giving, hoping that I would be noticed, hoping I would get some love or praise. And when I didn't, I ended up crashing. And even if I did get that love or praise, I would still crash because it didn't fix me. In our codependency recovery, we need to learn how to validate ourselves and not always look outside of ourselves for that love and that approval. So let's talk about the key difference between being nice and being codependent. So being nice comes from a place of wanting to contribute. You are at choice when you're being nice because you're making that conscious effort to give what you want to give. Whereas when you're being codependent, it feels like an addiction. It feels like we don't have a choice. We have to overgive because that's the only way we're going to be loved. And that's a hard way to live. So part of codependency recovery is recognizing the difference between when you want to be nice and when it slips into codependency. Now the next thing I want you to do is go watch my video on signs of codependent relationships because that's your next step. Thanks so much.